Welcome back, everyone. We're diving deep today into the world of honeybees. More specifically, their waggle dance. I mean, we've all heard of it, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's iconic.
It is. But is it all instinct?
Yeah.
Or is there some learning involved? Turns out there's a whole debate about that. And that's what we'll be exploring today, based on, some pretty cool new research.
It really is fascinating stuff. I mean, think about it. These tiny little creatures can communicate where to find food, and they can even talk about how good it is, all through this dance.
Yeah. So picture this. You're a bee. You've just found a field of, the best flowers ever, and you get back to the hive. How do you tell all your bee buddies where to go? Can't exactly draw them a map.
Nope, no little bee maps. That's where the waggle dance comes in. It's like their own special code, but with movements. So they do this figure-8 pattern, and then there's this straight part called the waggle run. And during that, the bee shakes her abdomen.
It's like a little dance routine, but with, really important information. So it's not just random wiggling, right?
Yeah. Oh, definitely not. There's meaning to all those moves.
So how does it actually work?
Okay, so the angle that waggle run, that tells the other bees the direction to fly, relative to the sun.
Ah, so they're using the sun as a reference point.
Okay.
Clever.
Right. And then, get this, the length of the waggle run. That tells them how far to go.
So longer waggle, farther away.
Exactly.
Wow, it's like their own little GPS system.
It really is remarkable.
And, scientists have known for a while now that there's a big genetic component to all this.
Yeah, for sure.
Like different species of honeybees.
They actually have their own distance calibrations.
What, like different dialects?
Kind of. But this research, the one we're talking about today, it goes a step further. It asks, can bees actually learn to dance better by watching each other?
So they're not just born knowing exactly how to do it. There's room for improvement.
Yeah, that's the question.
Okay, so how did they figure that out? Did they, put tiny tutus on the bees and give them dance lessons?
Not quite, although that would be adorable.
Right. They did something really clever, though. They set up two different types of bee colonies. In the first type, all the bees were the same age. Okay, so when those young bees started foraging and doing their first dances, they'd never actually seen another bee do it before.
Exactly.
Wow, that's like trying to invent a whole language without ever hearing anyone speak.
A tough task.
Right. So what about the second type of colony?
In those colonies, there were bees of all ages, a mix.
Oh, so the newbies
Yeah.
in those colonies, they got to watch all the experienced dancers strut their stuff before having to do their own waggle dance for the first time.
Precisely.
Clever. So by comparing these two groups, they could see if having those dance mentors actually made a difference.
Exactly. And the results, well, they were pretty surprising.
Oh, spill the tea.
Okay, so those bees who couldn't observe any dances beforehand, they made way more mistakes. Especially when it came to, communicating distance.
Ah, so their waggle runs didn't quite match up with how far away the food actually was.
Yeah, they were off.
So even though they're born with this instinct to dance, they can still mess it up.
Seems that way. And, get this, here's the kicker. Even after 20 days of experience, those bees, they never fully corrected their distance encoding.
Really?
Yeah, it's like they developed a bad habit they just couldn't shake.
So watching those experienced dancers, it's not just a nice to have, it's actually crucial for getting that distance communication, right?
It seems to be. So yeah, they have that basic instinct to dance. But social learning, it really plays a huge role in, refining that skill.
That is pretty mind-blowing. These tiny little creatures with brains smaller than a sesame seed, they're learning by watching each other.
It really makes you rethink intelligence, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
So is it more nature or nurture, this waggle dance?
Well, it seems like a bit of both, right? There's that genetic blueprint, for sure. But the environment and those social interactions, they clearly have a massive impact on how that blueprint actually plays out.
This is already blowing my mind, and we're just getting started. What else did the researchers find out? There's got to be more.
But there's definitely more. Oh, there's definitely more. So remember those bees who didn't get to observe others? The ones who really struggled with the distance part?
Yeah, those poor little guys.
Well, it turns out other aspects of the dance actually improved with practice. And this was true for both groups, the bees who had those mentors and those who didn't.
So even without seeing a good waggle run first, they eventually got better at some parts of the dance.
Exactly. Over time, both groups got better at their directional accuracy.
So how well they lined up their waggle run with the sun. To point their buddies in the right direction.
Right, exactly that.
Makes sense, I guess. The more they do it, the better they get at, like, hitting that right angle.
Yeah, practice makes perfect, right?
It does for bees, apparently.
And they also got better at the overall orderliness of their dances. At first, those novice dancers were a bit all over the place, but with experience, their movements became more precise, more efficient.
So is that just a matter of getting their, like, bee legs coordinated? Like, are they just a bit clumsy at first and then they smooth things
It
out?
could be part of it, for sure. But remember, even just watching those experienced dancers beforehand, that made a difference.
Yeah.
Those bees in the control group, the ones who are all the same age, they picked up some helpful tips just from observing.
Wow, so they're like little bee apprentices.
Exactly.
It really shows how important that social learning is, even for something that seems so, I don't know, instinctual like this dance.
It really does. And it raises an interesting question, actually. Why would honeybees evolve this way?
What do you mean?
Well, why not just make the dance 100% instinctual,
Yeah.
hardwired into their brains? Wouldn't that be more efficient?
Yeah, you'd think so, right? So what's the advantage of having a dance that can be, like, tweaked and refined?
Well, one possibility is that it lets the dance adapt to the unique challenges of each colony's environment.
You mean like the honeycomb itself?
Exactly. I mean, those honeycombs, they're not exactly flat dance floors, are they? They're complex, three-dimensional structures with all sorts of uneven surfaces.
Right, right.
Imagine trying to do a perfectly choreographed dance routine on a bumpy, irregular surface.
I'll probably trip over my own feet.
So maybe learning from those more experienced dancers, it helps the young bees adapt their movements to the specific contours of their colony's honeycomb.
So each hive has its own, like, dance floor terrain. And the older bees, they've already figured out how to navigate it.
Precisely. And that knowledge, it gets passed down through, observation and learning.
Okay, that makes sense. But there's got to be more to it than just, like, navigating a wonky honeycomb, right? What else could explain why this dance is so flexible?
Well, this is where things get really interesting. Some scientists think that those experienced dancers, they might actually be transmitting information about something called optic flow to their nestmates.
Optic flow. What in the world is that?
Okay, so think about when you're driving down a road. The scenery, it seems to rush past you, right?
Yeah.
The faster you go, the faster that scenery moves.
Yeah.
That's optic flow. It's the visual experience of motion. And bees, they experience something similar when they're flying.
Okay, so optic flow is basically how the world looks when you're moving. But what does that have to do with the waggle dance?
Well, the amount of optic flow a bee experiences while flying, it can actually influence how far they think they've flown.
Really?
Yeah, the more visual motion they experience, the farther they think they've gone.
So you're saying that the environment around a hive
Yeah.
could actually affect how bees communicate distance in their waggle dance?
Exactly. Imagine two hives, okay? One is in a dense forest, lots of trees and branches, whizzing by as the bees fly. And the other hive is in an open meadow, where there's not much visual clutter.
I'm seeing where you're going with this.
Right.
The forest bees, they experience way more optic flow than the meadow bees,
Right.
even if they fly the same distance.
Exactly. So the idea is that experienced dancers, they might actually incorporate information about their local optic flow environment into their waggle runs, making subtle adjustments to how they communicate distance.
And the young bees, by watching those experienced dancers, they would learn to calibrate their own dances to match the optic flow of their environment.
Precisely. It's almost like they're passing down a cultural map of their visual landscape through their dance.
Oh, that's wild. So even though they can't talk, they're sharing this important environmental information with each other through their movements.
Exactly. And remember those bees who never quite got their distance communication right?
The ones who didn't get to observe any experienced dancers.
Yeah, the ones who were stuck with that initial miscalculation. Well, that finding actually supports this whole optic flow hypothesis. You see, in the study, all the bee colonies were kept in the same apiary, so they all experienced a very similar optic flow environment.
Ah, so those bees who never got to see a good waggle run, they might have developed a distance encoding that was off for that particular location.
Yeah.
And they never had the chance to adjust it by watching others.
That's the thinking. Now, obviously, more research is needed to confirm whether this optic flow transmission is really happening, but it's a pretty mind-blowing possibility, isn't it?
Absolutely. It adds a whole new layer of complexity to the waggle dance. We started off talking about how bees use their dance to, like, point each other towards food, but now it sounds like they might be communicating about the whole landscape around them.
Exactly. And that leads us to an even bigger question. If bees can adapt their communication based on what they learn from each other and from the environment around them, could we consider this a form of culture?
Whoa, hold on. Bee culture. Now that's something I need to hear more about. Bee culture. That's a pretty wild thought.
It is, isn't it? I mean, we usually think of culture as something, something that humans have.
Right, or like really complex animals, like chimpanzees with their tool making.
Exactly. Or dolphins with their unique communication.
But bees, they always seem so, I don't know, programmed.
Right, like they're just running on instinct. But this research, it really challenges that idea
Yeah.
because, culture is basically learned behaviors, traditions, information that's passed down.
So are you saying those little waggle dance adjustments, the ones based on the optic flow, that could be like cultural knowledge,
Yeah,
unique to each colony?
it's definitely a possibility. If those experienced dancers are passing down information about the landscape and the young bees are learning from that, well, you've got a system where knowledge is being shared through social interaction, not just genes.
And that knowledge can change over time, right, as
Yeah.
the environment changes.
Exactly. Like, let's say a new forest grows up near a hive.
Yeah.
The bees' waggle dance, it would adapt to that new landscape.
So it's not just evolution in the traditional sense.
Right. It's not just random genetic mutations, it's a learned behavior passed down through generations of bees in that specific colony.
It really does start to look like culture when you put it that way.
It does, doesn't it?
I never would have thought that something as, seemingly simple as a bee's dance could lead to such deep questions about culture.
It's amazing, isn't it, how science can do that? We start with this basic question about how bees talk to each other. And it takes us down this incredible path where we're rethinking what intelligence even means.
And what learning means.
Mm.
And now culture, too.
It's incredible.
This deep dive has been amazing. I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of, what there is to learn about bees.
We definitely have, but I think it's safe to say we've all gained a new appreciation for the honeybee.
Yeah, they're not just little robots following a program.
Right, they're observant, adaptable, they learn from each other.
And they might even have culture.
It really makes you wonder, what other secrets are out there, hidden in the natural world?
Just waiting to be discovered.
Exactly.
Well, a huge thank you to you for taking us on this incredible journey.
It was my pleasure.
And to all our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you learned something new today and that you'll keep exploring the natural world with, curiosity and an open mind. Until next time.